Hello and welcome to the Recursive Podcast. Our next guest takes education very seriously, so much so that she founded an edtech startup. Evelina Necula is the co-founder of Kinderpedia, a school management software that simplifies administrative stuff to help teachers, parents, and students communicate better. Today, Kinderpedia is used by schools and kindergartens in 14 countries, in over 2,000 schools and kindergartens worldwide. Evelina leans on her marketing and B2B sales experience to scale the company. Evelina, welcome to the Recursive Podcast.
Hello, Georgi, and thank you for having me. It's a great satisfaction to be here.
Education is very important for me, as well as entrepreneurship, and here we have this Kinderpedia project that's basically one way of helping the other. So, entrepreneurship helping education. How does your company, your idea for Kinderpedia, contribute to the transformation of education?
That is amazing that we start with this question, because we go straight to the mission of Kinderpedia, which is actually to transform education using technology on one side by simplifying administrative processes, as you say, alleviating the burden of bureaucracy from schools and kindergartens, and on the other by placing parent, teacher, student communication right at the core of the learning act. So what we do is create an environment where teachers, because they are the center, the core of education, in the sense that they are the greatest facilitators, actually have the time to do what matters most, which is personalized education for every student. We do that by simplifying what else they were doing, which was off core, off focus from what should education and learning be about at its best, let's say. And we started doing that more than 8 years ago. And on this interval, we managed to consolidate, let's say, 5 big areas of intervention. One of them is, as we said initially, parent engagement. And I hope to have the opportunity to tell you that that is actually where we started from. That was our initial aha moment. But we soon realized that we need more. So we went into school and nursery management. And that is the area where we help them organize their structure. We help them get a shadow digital infrastructure for their brick and mortar structure in the school or kindergarten. We help them plan better. We help them get more coherent monitoring of what they do, and obviously be able to report and get instant snapshots of how their school or kindergarten looks like. This seems very administrative, but if we take it one step upwards, it's actually the core of leadership, being able to get access to insights and to valuable information which helps you move forward. Also, we worked a lot on classroom management, because we realized how important it is, especially as we went towards primary school, elementary. We realized how important it is for the teacher to have an interactive connection with the students. And in order to do that, we digitalized the daily schedule, the way they grade, the way they give absences, motivate them, and even more important things like scheduling assignments, correcting assignments directly from the mobile app, or even starting a video conference if needed, directly from their mobile app. So that is the classroom management side in a nutshell. And we looked a bit forward and we said, okay, so they are doing this in classroom. They are getting along very well, and they are already starting to use digital as a channel of interaction, because this is how it should be looked like, as a means, not necessarily as a purpose. But how do we do to take the essence out of that? And in order to do that, we worked a lot with our international partners, and we realized that they were doing a lot of progress monitoring. And this progress monitoring was most of the times did offline. They used all sorts of charts and sheets and graphs in order to let's say, visualize the process of growth in a child in early education and later on. And then we took upon ourselves the challenge of turning that into something digital, something which they don't have to do at the end of the day, or even worse, at the end of the week or the month, and turn it into something they can do every day from their mobile app. So how it works, like student progress monitoring, is that you take a curriculum, you put it online in the platform, in your library, with all its items and competencies, and then you start monitoring the progress on each item. All those observations, which, as I said, you can do on the spot, can go to parents immediately, which gives them a great sense of belonging and a great sense of participation and of awareness, but also go towards a periodical report. And looking at that periodical report, one teacher or more teachers, because most of the time this is collaborative, can look at a child and say they're doing great in these aspects, but they need support in these other 2 or 3 competencies or things, abilities that they are not yet mastering. And in order to do that, they set up personalized learning plans for each student. So that's how student progress monitoring works. And we are also doing something which is very valuable for private education, which has been one of our first realms, to say so, because obviously private education is very entrepreneurial, very innovative, and decisions are taken much easier over there. We are doing school financial management, which means that we are automatizing the issuing of invoices for tuition fees. The invoices go straight to parents' app based on the activity of the children within the school. And more so, the parents also get the possibility, with the Stripe integration, which we did lately, to pay the invoice electronically. So we streamline the financial operations of private education. We help them cash in easier, because we know that financial stability is very important, especially in education, which is quite a challenged field from this point of view. So these are the 5 areas of intervention which we have: school management, classroom management, parent engagement, student progress tracking, and financial management for private education.
This sounds amazing.
I think this covers the first question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what a tons of work you've done in 8 years, and there's a question that's resonating in my mind when young entrepreneurs want to start something big, like a platform like yours, like Kinderpedia. They're like, I want to do this and have this and this and this and this and this. Like, but where did you start from? So where did you say, okay, this is a problem that we start off with, and then we can expand into different things whenever we're ready with the first solution, first offer that we have?
So there's actually a nice story behind that, because we started back, let's say, in 2013 when the idea was born, and it started with the first aha moment when we realized that in early childhood education, teachers and families were not communicating enough. That was the first pain we saw. And we saw it on 2 sides. We looked at how teachers were struggling to send information across to families. The most innovative ones were using 4 or 5 tools at a time. They were on emails, on Messenger, on Facebook. They were sending WeTransfer files. They were even organizing SurveyMonkey polls for parents to answer. But as you can imagine, all these attempts got lost somehow in the email of the parents, or in other, let's say, environments which were not dedicated to education. But when you go to Facebook, you don't necessarily go there to check the status of kindergarten. That's how they were often frustrated, and we could see that frustration, because they were doing their best and they were not getting the results they were expecting. And on the other side, we could already see and have an intuition of the anxiety of parents, because these days, parents leave their children in kindergarten from early in the morning to very late in the afternoon. Sometimes they are not even the ones who leave them and pick them up. They just meet at home for dinner or for some outdoor activities, who knows. And there's a huge communication gap in there. There's a void where parents actually don't know what's happening with their children throughout the day. And that void leads to anxiety, and anxiety leads to mistrust. And this is burning down, let's say, the potential bridges of collaboration between kindergartens, because that's where we started from, and families. And then we looked at children, because that's basically the whole, let's say, the key subject of intervention. And we saw the huge opportunities which they were missing out on because families were not talking to teachers. They were missing the opportunity to collaborate, to share similar values, to establish similar routines, to pull in the same direction, to say it easier. So that's what we said. That these guys are probably the most motivated people we will ever find to do something. There's no productivity guru in a company which would be more motivated than a parent or a teacher to bring forward the child. And if they're not managing to communicate and to sit on the same level, it means that they don't have the right tools. It doesn't mean they don't have the right mindset, or they obviously do. So this is a huge opportunity. We will go there and we will just give them a tool which will help them communicate better, share the same values, pull in the same direction, and help children grow in the years which matter most. Because maybe at this time, it's already, let's say, more known internationally that the early years are the ones which bring the greatest growth and the greatest development in children. But it wasn't always like this. And we said, okay, if we have the understanding, let's bring the tool towards it. And in 2014, we managed to obtain an European grant in order to build the beta version of the product. And you said, let's start somewhere. We somehow, even though we were just starting, we wanted to start everywhere. So we already thought from that time of 10 modules to include in Kinderpedia that would cover the most important communication needs of the schools and the families. And we had the beta product ready sometime in 2015, and from there we kept building. So that's where it started from.
So you're constantly talking about we. Where do the other co-founders of the company, Daniel and Valentin, come in? Because it's hard for a person to do something on his own nowadays, especially. So how did you find this joint mission with your co-founders to go into education?
Well, Daniel is the heart and soul of the product, and for me, he was like an evangelist, because he was the one who turned me to entrepreneurship. And he was also, because of his very technical background, he was also the one to initially find Valentin. And we have a nice story behind that. So he's the CEO of the company. He was also at the core of the initial idea, and it was the idea of Kinderpedia which helped him convince me to become an entrepreneur, because I was a professional. I was doing very well in the area of marketing and communication in the corporate world, and to me that was very good. I had role models in my family of people being managers, inspiring people without actually owning their own business. So it was enough. And he kept saying to me, you don't have the spirit of a worker. You don't have the spirit of an employee. You have the spirit of an entrepreneur, because you go the extra mile. You are constantly looking for new ways to do things. And these are in the DNA of an entrepreneur. And I kept saying, this is what I do, because it's my responsibility, because it is part of my endeavor to make sure that I do my job right, regardless of the time it takes, because I have a commitment to some people and they need to see me for the professional and competent person that I am. And as obviously we were working at several things in the background, because early years in entrepreneurship are not easy, and everyone knows that. But he couldn't convince me to get across, to take the step. But when the idea of Kinderpedia was born, when we were brainstorming that we could actually do something that would mean so much for people, for children on the long term, that's when I said, okay, I'm in.
Awesome. Sounds great. So later on, you became a parent, and how did this change your experience and the vision for education?
Well, parenting is a very subjective mission, to say so. And we have a saying here in Romania that the shoemaker has no shoes. I often feel like that as a parent. I'm constantly thinking that I'm trying to transform education, that we as a team are doing that on a daily basis. And even so, my son is spending so much time in kindergarten that I'm sometimes taking him in late because I've been working all night, or I'm picking him up late because I've been caught in a conference and I could not leave before the Q&A was over. And I'd say the thing that alleviates this anxiety, which I believe also other entrepreneurs and high achieving professionals have, is the partnership which I've managed to build with his teachers. The fact that I know that even though he has to spend the whole or the biggest chunk of the day with other people, those people are people whom I trust, whom share similar values to the values of my family, and whom are competent, and they are also honest and transparent. So first, we established the partnership, and then also the tool came, and obviously Kinderpedia is helping me keep up with what my son is doing when I'm not with him. So it does change, it does shift somehow the perception of about education, but I try to step a bit upwards and not look at my own experience as much as at the experience which all children have or should have in their schools. Because I'm thinking that eventually my son goes to a very good kindergarten. I will be able to choose a good school for him to follow, but that should not be an exception, and it should not be a privilege. It should be the right which all children have.
Awesome. And you're also the user of your own product, which I guess helps a lot to be keeping an eye on a daily basis of what's in and what can get better. So
obviously, I'm a critical user, to say so. I always go back to my colleagues and said, this I should be able to do easier. So we refactor all the time based on feedback, and I am one of the people who provide that feedback.
Being a parent and putting this role as a user, as a parent in the product, obviously changed the way that you look at it. But during the entire process, would you be able to share some lessons that you learned along the way of developing such a product?
If we have the time, I will just give you a bit of an intro into how our story evolved over the years. I already told you that we started in 2013 when we incubated the idea. We obtained an initial European funding, and by 2015 we already had a beta product. What we did not know at that time, and it was not caught in any way in our initial business plans, was that more than 2 years would pass until we get the first paying customers. So our first years were years when we had to do a lot of research. We had to do a lot of validation, because we could already spot the market fitness. We already had excellent feedback, and yet people were not ready to pay because they didn't see the need. They were seeing it more as an add-on. We could do that, but we're still good on WhatsApp. It's okay. It still works like this. So we needed to help them understand better. And these years were years of exploration, when we understood that in order for nurseries and families to communicate better, they actually needed to get better organized. So it took some building up of the product to turn it into a school management and communication platform in order for them to have a better, more coherent structure and to show a more transparent and coherent image to the families. We also realized, and this was one of the greatest insights, that the future of technology is mobile. So building a platform would not suffice, especially in an environment like education where you cannot have teachers sitting on a chair and adding information on a computer every day. And we also realized that we needed partners, we needed ambassadors in order to shape the mentalities in such a way as to convince teachers not just that they could, but that they should share what they do with the families. So we organized conferences, we went to fairs, we did research. Those were the early days, to say so. And at last, in 2018, we managed to convince our angel investors to come on board, and that meant a lot for the company, especially from a financial and from a security point of view, because we had been bootstrapping for quite a while, but also from, let's say, a more professional, more strategic point of view, because it was then when we started looking coherently at how we would go towards international markets. Then 2019 came, and that was a very, very nice year for Kinderpedia, because it was a year when we realized that in order to gain the traction that we wanted, we needed to address equally kindergartens and schools. And that was the year when we released the electronic gradebook onto the platform and some classroom management features, which made it possible for many prestigious private schools to come on board. But it was also a very nice year when it came to the recognition of the company and of the product and of our mission, because on that year we won the first place in Innovators for Children, an accelerator organized by Impact Hub. We obtained the third place in Startarium, which, wow, to me was and still is, as a reference, one of the greatest competitions for entrepreneurs. And we also started to go out and get some awareness internationally. For example, the European Business Angels Network stated that Kinderpedia is a tech for good product and invited us to their summit in Brussels, and that's where Amazon also gave us an award. So it was a great satisfaction to see that we were no longer by ourselves in our bubble, that we were gaining awareness, that more people were gathering towards and around our mission, and that was a strong motivation booster, especially because we needed all that motivation for what was coming in 2020. Thinking about 2020, I remember how quick the transition and the spin-off was from being a support product for schools and kindergartens to becoming the only means of connection between students and their teachers. And schools closed in around the 10th of March in Romania. And on the 16th of March, which was the next Monday, we were already releasing our remote video teaching tool, which worked by integration with Zoom. So from Kinderpedia, any teacher could start a video lesson straight from the daily timeline with just one tap. And it was equally easy for students to get into the lesson and connect to their teachers and to their school community. It was obviously a year of great struggle, because we gave out the product for free to all public education. We subsidized a lot of what our existing customers used to pay, because they were also struggling. Private education was not in a very good place at that time, and there wasn't too much certainty on what was coming. And yet we managed to do it, because it was also the year when we felt most the sense of community. It was the year when RocaX, a very dynamic and innovative VC, decided to support Kinderpedia along with Seedblink and Growceanu in a, let's say, pre-seed round of €500,000, which helped us a lot in getting across to 2021 and, let's say, going back to our initial purpose and to the goal of our product. We were very, very excited to see how many angel investors, because that's where you see in human connections, you see most the value of the product, said, I want to support Kinderpedia, either because they were users or because they understood what we were doing, and they just wanted to be by our side, not only with cash, but also by recommending us to other schools, by giving us advice, and so on. And then 2021 was the year when, as I was saying, we went back to the purpose. We said, okay, now more or less schools are going back to normal. What were we supposed to do? And that was the year when we released our child progress monitoring tool, one which we had already started building since 2019, and which we believe will be, let's say, at the foundation of how education will transform, because it facilitates personalization, instant feedback, and it's a way for students also to better understand where they stand and where should they go towards.
So we can say that pandemic, which was very troublesome times for a lot of businesses, helped you accelerate your growth through the fact that you were already prepared to digitalize education in a way, and helped you get on board people like entrepreneurs, and because all the angel investors are such, to say, hey, education is important. I've never met an investor or entrepreneur that said that education is not important. So having friends like this on board is very, very helpful.
It is indeed. Thinking about 2020, I always have mixed feelings, but as it always happens, a crisis is a great catalyzer of energies. So for the people who were already in the community, it meant a lot, because they were far better prepared to tackle what was coming up. For those who were hesitating whether to start now or to start next year, it was a strong vector of transformation. They just called us and said, we will do it immediately. So all of a sudden we were doing onboardings and trainings and workshops like crazy. I mean, the volume spiked dramatically. But I cannot understate the fact that it also had a huge impact on those who were not prepared for digitalization, because there were many people left behind who had to change from one day to another at a country level and even internationally, and who had no resources to do that. And for those, the pandemics was more of an inhibitor when it comes to technology, because they hated it then. Some of them adopted it, some went around it, and now they don't want to hear about it. But it's not something particular, it's what generally happens in crisis. So for those who were not ready to embrace technology, the idea of online school, which is just a small slice of what digital can bring to education, was such a great trauma. They were so, and I'm not talking about Kinderpedia users, because I do believe that we are amongst those who offered the strongest support. But I'm talking about those who are just left out on a limb. Just do whatever you can. Go there, use this, use that. And then nobody answered their calls anymore. For those people, now going back at the idea of technology is almost impossible. I mean, they went back immediately. The moment schools reopened, they closed their computers and they said, that's it. And they were with the chalk on the blackboard. So then we started our second education mission, to say so, to convince people that technology is not just a raincoat. You don't just use it today and forget about it tomorrow. It's a way of communicating. It's not a purpose, as I was saying, but it's a means which you have to use if you want to bring technology to the 21st century. There is no other way.
Yeah, education to the 21st century as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did I say?
Yeah, it's a technology to the 21st century.
Oh, yes, sorry.
You basically meant that education needs to keep up. Because
okay, so I can, if you want, I can say the phrase again.
No,
I was so caught up in it that I wasn't even thinking.
Because I'm listening, so
thank you,
such
That's
astonishment of what you're saying, and you're basically reliving what I was thinking about digitalization of education in the entire Balkans. Like Bulgaria is absolutely the same thing. So it's a great mission that you're on track of. You are already completing, so you're on track on getting it everywhere around the world, so 14 countries. How and when did you decide that it's the right time to expand to other markets? We are still not out of the pandemic.
That is actually interesting because we started Kinderpedia with an international purpose. So from the moment we built the tool, it was already multi-language, multi-currency, because we have the financial management tool. It was cloud-based, and soon after we also built the mobile apps, the native mobile apps for both school and family, in order to make sure that it's accessible everywhere. Obviously, from being product ready to being market ready, there's a huge difference, and we are still working towards mending that difference, but probably an important element, an important milestone in the development towards an international solution was 2020, and it coincided a bit with the pandemics when we signed and we implemented our first partnership with an international education franchise, and I'm talking about Maple Bear, Central and Eastern Europe, which chose Kinderpedia at that time as their unique digital infrastructure solution. And then later on, the master franchise of United Arab Emirates did the same. And 1 year later, in early 2021, we also signed a global partnership.
Wow, amazing. Thinking global and going for global markets is something that more or less we at the Balkans will need to start doing, like UiPath, taking the good examples. It is possible. Let's go global. Let's not build only local solutions. How do you think that technology we were discussing just now can enhance the relationship between teacher and children in the classroom itself? Because more or less what I've heard from your story and understood from the product's perspective is that you are making it so easy for the teacher to spend most of the time at what he should be and she should be doing most, like personalized, direct, in-person education.
So far, I shared a lot about the teacher's role and how we should alleviate their burden in order to help them focus more on, as you said, personalized education. But as we look towards the 21st century, we already know that students are at the center of education. In order for them to be able to become more autonomous, more responsible, to take charge of their learning path, they need a tool to do that. They need the constant feedback I was talking about, but they also need to take education and the learning process outside the school walls. They need to be able to become curious about something at home, explore it, and then take it to school and talk about it there. That is where technology plays a huge role, and I believe Kinderpedia is one of the tools which is mostly supporting active learning, which is highly personalized, it is collaborative, it is based a lot on building competencies rather than conveying direct knowledge. So that is, in my opinion, an active classroom, one where the teacher can look at everyone but have a different perspective on all students. It is inclusive because it allows all students access to education. It is ubiquitous, if you want, because it doesn't only happen in school. You can connect from home, you can continue at home, you can work with your classroom colleagues, and this makes it an interactive environment. So technology is not the subject, it's the facilitator of a classroom where every student feels they matter, that they can have an opinion, that they can impact their own education, that they can even teach. If we look at what John Hattie is saying, and he's one of the greatest researchers in the field of education in this century, he's placing feedback as one of the strongest and most impactful elements of education. And the highest level of feedback from his point of view is teach back. So when you can get students so high up in the learning, on the learning pyramid, that they can teach to others, that they can become the protagonists of education, that is when you know you've reached a strong transformative milestone.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm hoping that I get more examples of students teaching other students. So when talking about technology and education, there is, of course, this concept that comes into the conversation called artificial intelligence. Do you see the role of artificial intelligence as technology, and can it bring a value, and what kind of value can it bring to education?
Most certainly, yes. There's a huge impact of artificial intelligence in education, and I believe we haven't yet grasped the potential of it. So this is something which is still in progress, especially in an area which is so conservative as education is these days. But what I would like, when I think about artificial intelligence, what I would like to demolish is an ugly, terrible myth which has been born and which is somehow traveling in education, which is that robots would ever be able to replace teachers. And to me, this is insane. But it's not just me, because we're not talking about my opinion. I recently looked at a research from back in 2019 from PwC, which was stating that just in our country, education will be the second field to gain more employees as a result of new technologies after health. So not just that it will not replace teachers, it's that it will bring more human potential to the education by properly employing those tools. And I think this is something which all teachers should know, because it looks like the Inquisition to me to think in the 21st century that robots would replace us. Sure, they will replace iterative, mindless jobs, but no teacher should ever think of their job as being iterative and mindless. And as we need more and more personalization and more abstract concepts being brought to, let's say, a more accessible shape in order for them to be grasped and employed by students, there will be need for more teachers, and AI will empower that. It will not diminish it.
I had a wonderful conversation a few weeks back with my friend Peter Sharkov, who is the CEO of something called School Telerik Academy, that's teaching digitalized skills to kids in Bulgaria. And he was saying that the most important role of the teacher and the thing that helps him empower kids the most is his attitude. And AI cannot bring attitude. I mean, interperson communication can bring attitude. So thank you very much for pointing it out. How do you, Evelina, how do you measure the social impact of your company at the moment, like Kinderpedia, impact on the society in Romania and probably globally?
This is something we are looking at very closely, because it's where we pull most of our motivation and drive to go forward from. On a short term, we look at interactions. We look at how many teachers are able to schedule assignments easier, how many students are able to give in their assignments and to receive feedback in shorter loops, which is a very strong brick to the foundation of their learning. We are looking at how parents have better and more accessible way to look at their children's progress and how this is building trust. So this is the first layer, the one which is visible literally on a short term. We can just take a snapshot and say, look, we have more than 25,000 teachers, and these teachers are giving this amount of homework and so on. When we look at the middle to long term, we look at how Kinderpedia can support, let's say, in the diminishing of functional illiteracy. Because by getting a better and more interactive communication, both between student and teacher and between teacher and parent, what we do is contextualize learning. We make it part of the community. It has been suspended in a limbo for far too long. And in order to become more relevant to students, especially to the digital natives which are in school today, we need to get this contextualization. And I believe technology helps a lot in doing that, because it creates the bridges for students to ask questions, for teachers to reply, to enrich the context of education, for parents to also be on the loop and to be able to intervene and to support rather than to blame. And this is great. Also, we are in a country and in a region which is still struggling with school dropout. If we bring parents closer to their students at the times of transition, because those are the times when you get the highest rates of dropout, either children who don't go to school at all, or children who, like, assuming that they went to some form of kindergarten, or children who don't go from primary to secondary cycle or don't follow up to all the way to high school. Those areas of transition is where, if you have a child's portfolio, you know which are their strengths, which are their weaknesses, how can you support them. In smaller communities, this is very well taken care of, because you have an educator and a teacher, a primary school teacher, who are from the same village, let's say. They have common sense. It's impossible for them not to talk between each other and say, hey, I've had some trouble with this kid, be aware, they're more visual. If you want to keep them engaged in a task, you should do this, or you should tell them a story, and so on. But you don't get that in the big cities anymore, and most of the children are now living and learning in big cities. And technology can create also these bridges between institutions. Going from kindergarten to school with a portfolio can tell you how education or literacy ready you are. And then another important milestone, when you finish primary, where you have more or less one point of contact, one teacher of reference, and you go to many, the information from that teacher can easily go through the app to all the other teachers. So these are ways in which Kinderpedia and technology in general can support education and create a greater impact on the long run.
Awesome, thank you so much. I would really like to switch a bit the focus towards your leadership values and how you managed to create such an organization as Kinderpedia. What are the values that you try the organization to adhere to? Are there some particular things that needs pointing out?
We started with innovation. We realized from the very beginning that we don't need to be a plaster. We need to be super disruptive if we want to make a change, if we want to make an impact. And this is something we are looking at every day. Are we disruptive enough? Are we really doing everything that we can from this point of view? And obviously behind that comes creativity, tech savviness, but also a very strong, and this would be our second value, sense of engagement. So we have internally a very strong sense of engagement and of commitment to create engagement within our communities and with our users. So engagement is something we are looking at every day, and it's not for nothing. It's because if we look at statistics, they say that maybe 95% of the tools, the digital tools which schools buy, are almost never used or improperly used. 30% are never installed. Some other 25% are installed but are never accessed, and the rest are used either to 25% or up to 50% of their potential. So what we started from the very beginning was the sense that we don't just want to create a product. We want to create the experience which that product brings in order to obtain the impact which it can provide. And so, for example, we have a very elaborated break-in roadmap for schools which go into the platform, so that within the first weeks they are on board, and then by the first month they are already familiar with the key features. Within 3 months they know how to use everything which they need because it's highly configurable, and by 1 year we hope to make them a success story. So that's how we work with our schools, and we have visiting checkpoints with them to make sure that they are doing things right. And sometimes we're almost annoying because they say, it's enough. I have this, it's good for me, it's enough. And it would be easy to sit back and say, okay, we've created some value. Probably this client will not leave us because they are already engaged with some of the features. But still we strive for more, and we tell them, but if you would also use this, then you would save more time, and you would be able to dedicate that time to something else, and that would bring better value. So that would be the second value. And we are also striving for simplicity. That's why we are building and rebuilding and factoring and refactoring, because we believe that user experience is the key driver of engagement within the app. So we don't just happen to be a platform with an amazing user experience. We work towards that every day. We look at buttons, just as I was saying, and say, this should not be here. It takes too long to get to it. Let's put it someplace else. Let's brainstorm.
There's one thing that I see as a bystander here, having met you like 1 hour ago and being brought into the story of Kinderpedia and how structurally you approach everything. Even your thoughts are so aligned and organized, and now you just mentioned milestones and roadmaps, and like, oh my God, this is so organized. This is a way that a guy with a like perfectionist view and how things should look like go, but with this brain of soul that's like, okay, let's reiterate and do it again and make it better and strive for making it simpler, because most of the perfectionists tend to go to, let's put all like added features that no one ever uses, but you are just putting simple in the same sentence, which is, it's amazing. Thank you very much, Evelina, for this. I'm totally the opposite, but it doesn't really matter. How did your relationship with your co-founders evolve over time?
It's such a nice question to ask, because we are literally like a family. Part of us are also a family. That makes it simpler to get that feeling. But what is very important is that from the very first day, we complemented each other very well. That was the key, the secret sauce, the key ingredient that made our partnership work. The fact that Daniel is the perfect example of CEO. He's very driven, he's very spontaneous, he's extremely bold, he has a clear vision of how to go forward, and sometimes he's never afraid of taking risks, let's say. I, on the other hand, I'm a marketing person, so I'm always connected to the core, to the values. Let's see what our mission is. Let's go back. Let's recheck it. Let's revisit our key goals. So I'm very structured, and I'm also very out there. I make it my mission to communicate, to speak loudly about what we do and why it matters. And Vali is an exceptional engineer. So he's the exact person you want to have by your side to make sure that things are going. And especially as the platform is growing more and more, it's so important to make sure that the digital infrastructure is in place and that everything is working well, and that we are making the best we can to avoid mistakes, errors, and so on. The best we can. So not everything. So we are perfectionists because Romanian school has created perfectionists in our generation, but we are also people who have learned to embrace error as a way of learning and eventually growing. So you
built this like supplementing each other team of professionalists. And this sounds like the recipe for a strong and solid team. So thank you very much, because I don't think there is another way of implementing something so impactful and so big, because you're more or less indirectly influencing the education of future generations. I'm asking this question about the co-founders because there's a lot of talks lately about this resilience in founders. What's your stance on that?
When I think of resilience, I always think about our very first years. Now, when nobody was buying our product, they were saying, oh, it's nice. Guys, you're great. The fact that you thought of it, that you went all the way to build that, that's amazing. And then when you set a contract on their table, they're like, oh, okay, maybe not today, we're not ready. So that, to me, looking back, because at that time I didn't have the term. I didn't know we were resilient. I just knew we had to survive some way, and that if we believed enough in our product and in the vision we had for it, we will do it. I would say that founders have resilience. I mean, the founders I know, the founders I connect with, I see them all having resilience. What I would like to see, and I'm not saying it's not, but what I would like to cultivate and to see cultivated more in the entrepreneurial community is the resilience of investors. Because as you go towards later investment stages, obviously there comes more pressure. And what I believe is that every investor, and we are amongst the lucky ones because those who chose to be by our side, Early Game Venture in 2021, RocaX in 2020, Seedblink and Growth Channel, those are people who can connect to the value which the product brings and to the long-term mission. But I see a lot of pressure put on founders, on startup founders, to get results. And sometimes getting immediate results gets in the way of getting the long-term results. So let's also build the resilience of investors, especially when it comes to social entrepreneurship.
Great. And there's another important question that arises from here is, of course, the strength of female founders. And can you, in a way, encourage other female entrepreneurs to build bravely, to go into their own products?
Obviously, there should be the initial courage of stepping forward, and here probably there's still a lot to do from the side of the community. Not because they would be like a disadvantaged category, but because they are a huge area of untapped potential for entrepreneurship today, women as founders. And I believe what they can bring is amazing, because women are extremely responsible. They're almost never reckless. They're very calculated, very rigorous, extremely diplomatic, which are amazing traits as the business grows. So in the beginning, you need a lot of spontaneity. You need to go around the fence. You need the creativity. And I'm not saying women don't have it, but some of these traits are maybe better associated with men. But as you grow, and in parallel on the growth path, you also need to make sure that you have your checkpoints, that you are connected to your values, that you are staying loyal to your customer and to your end goal. And this is something where women are excellent at. And I strongly also believe in the value of complementarity. As I was saying from the very beginning, I would not be able to have founded and built Kinderpedia by myself. I believe, however, that my values and my competencies are very well put in action in this partnership.
Yeah, let's put also one bonus that you women had stronger than in ourselves, the men, is intuition. So we would just add it to the list. You are not only very inspiring as like entrepreneur with a very strong mission, but you're also supporting very important social causes like the Hospice of Hope, Vitor Plus, in your free time. What is the impact that you want to have, not only as a business owner, but as a human being?
I always say that if I was not as involved as I am in education, and I am blessed to have this role, I would probably be an environmental activist. I care a lot for the nature. I love to spend time outside, and I think it is our responsibility to leave the earth in as good shape as we can to the next generations, especially because I'm also a parent. So I love spending time outside. I love participating in trees planting activities, running for social causes. And I think this also is something that grounds me and the people I collaborate with, because it's never been something I've been doing by myself. It was always a team activity. Sometimes it came from me, some other times it came from others as a suggestion, and I just went on board immediately without questioning it for a second. And for everyone, it is important to feel that they can do more, even more than they do in their day-to-day life at work, because we all need a sense of belonging, a sense of pulling towards a greater mission. And I do see sometime in the, let's say, further future, a space where I would be less involved operationally with Kinderpedia and more involved in advocacy and in making the world a better place.
Amazing way to finish our conversation. Evelina Necula, thank you very much for investing your time and efforts and love into education, bringing it towards the digital age, and I wish you and your entire team all the best and great success.
Thank you, Georgi. This has been a great talk, and I am grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us this week too, and we'll see you next week on the Recursive Podcast. Bye.
Next on the Recursive Podcast, we meet with one of the most influential tech people in Europe, the editor-at-large at TechCrunch, Mike Butcher.
I'd much rather us thinking about the here and now, about the fact that 1 billion people in Africa may have to move in the next 20 or 30 years because of climate change, because of global warming. And I'd rather us think about that now, because as soon as we think about it now, the faster we can solve these problems. Many people have been talking about the energy crisis over the last few months, obviously exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. If we, for instance, switch to renewables and wind turbines 30 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. If onshore wind and offshore wind had been put in place in the 1990s, when we had the technology, we wouldn't even been talking about the price of gas right now. So let's get on that train and not keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again, which is obviously the definition of madness.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive Podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.